phrase memento mori means, remember, you must die, and is a phrase common within the philosophical tradition of antiquity, but also pertains to some later existentialist thought processes. This phrase might immediately lead people to think an inevitable and indeterminate death is obvious, but not really of any concern because it's quite a ways off. Such an understanding of the phrase is a fundamental misconception that ignores the immediate nature of death in an effort to avoid the existentialist dread of existence. In a Heideggerian sense, to be is for a being to live authentically within its own temporality, and for one to do so, one must acknowledge that death is present in every moment of its life. Persona 3 presents a narrative that seeks to remind the player of this existential reality and to ultimately provide some insight into how one can live authentically and with determination. The primary characters of Persona 3 are all deeply impacted by finitude and death, with Makoto losing both of his parents as a child, and the other party members of SEES all feeling finitude or loss in their own unique ways. All the characters respond to the deaths within their lives differently, and these events come to fundamentally motivate them at the start of the game and give them the potential to see the dark hour and manifest personas. Even though the main cast has experienced death and finitude before the events of the main story, they aren't yet able to wholly accept the inevitability and nature of death until they face those true implications in their battle against the Dark Hour and Nyx. The Dark Hour is a deeply symbolic phenomenon in the story of Persona 3 and seems to represent a hypertemporal state where those who have the potential can act freely regardless of the danger of shadows. It's revealed during SEES' visit to Yakushima and the confrontation with Ikutsuki that the Dark Hour was created due to the hubris of Mitsuru's grandfather, who sought to gain control over time itself. However, this endeavor led him to become obsessed with inducing the ultimate death of all life, the Fall. The Dark Hour, as such, seems to be a progenitor to the truth of the Fall and Nyx, being a hypertemporal state whereby the different shadows of death induce apathy syndrome within the population by consuming the psyches of all affected. Initially, the SEES team is tricked into defeating all the scattered shadows of the Arcana to unite them into the Death Arcana and invoke the Fall by Ikutsuki. The destruction of the separate 12 shadows does cause an immediate decline in the cases of apathy syndrome in the areas of operation, but their eventual unification essentially made the Fall more robust than it ever could be without their unification. The question remains as to why Mitsuru's grandfather Koetsu Kijiro and Ikutsuki would desire the absolute end that is Nyx to enter the world. It's undeniable that both figures were deeply knowledgeable and intelligent, but Takahiro Kijiro remarks that his father only harbored nihilism in his heart during his later years. Both Koetsu and Ikutsuki being driven to bring about the Fall seems to imply that understanding death brought with it an absolute belief in finitude that made everything else seem pointless. This understanding of knowledge within the framework of the Arcana ties into Nyx and her understanding of fate that I'll talk about a little bit later. Fulfilling the nihilism of Koetsu Kijiro and Ikutsuki, and contrasting the members of SEES and their approach to the Dark Hour, are the members of Strega, who were all forced to manifest personas against their will and had their lives shortened as a result. Strega seeks to use their powers only for their benefit and to live in the immediate moment, instead of concerning themselves with attachments or the past and future. In a Heideggerian sense, Strega's approach to life is an inauthentic one, as they essentially live in death by falling prey to the temporal nature of life by only concerning themselves with things that immediately present themselves to them. Instead of living authentically by finding attachments and discovering things that are meaningful to them in life, they distract themselves with immediate gratification up until the end they've been avoiding finally comes. Their lifestyle ultimately is the manifestation of nihilism and represents the will to death that is latent within the collective consciousness of humanity. It's eventually revealed that the 13th Arcana of Death was sealed within Makoto by Aigis when he was a child, and that he manifested within Makoto throughout the entirety of the game in the forms of Pharos, Thanatos, and Ryoji. Pharos is the first manifestation of death and seems to check Makoto in his resolve when reminded of specific fundamental facts about the Dark Hour and life. He constantly reminds Makoto of the Fall and notes that the Fall isn't some malevolent force, but rather something wished for by the collective human psyche. Defeating all the major shadows of the Dark Hour causes Pharos to regain all of his memories, and he's finally able to leave his confinement within the protagonist and become an individual in the form of Ryoji. Ryoji has had the emotions and attachments of Makoto impact him from his time spent sealed within his psyche, and as such, he comes to enjoy life as a student until he's reminded of his true nature by Aigis on the moonlit bridge. Once Ryoji awakens to his true nature as death, he offers the members of SEAS a choice in how they respond to Nyx. They can either allow Ryoji to live and fully become death, guaranteeing terror during the inevitable fall, or they can kill Ryoji and lose their memories of the fall and live in blissful ignorance. The members of SEAS deeply consider the decision and make a resolution to meet again on graduation day, regardless of what happens, to have a future to work towards. Ultimately, everyone within SEAS is resolved to let Ryoji live and to face the harsh reality of death, but Makoto is left with the choice of what to do. Makoto can kill Ryoji and undermine everything he and his friends have worked for throughout the game, fast-forwarding time to graduation day. Makoto, Junpei, and Yukari all listen to Mitsuru's speech about the future for graduation day, but they notice how even she seems to be half-hearted in her delivery. Then, Yukari and Junpei criticize the speech because they believe thinking of the future is pointless and too stressful. Their critiques sound very out of character given all the events up to this point, creating a jarring dissonance from everything the story was leading up to. They both talk about seizing the day and living in the moment, just as Takaya always advocated within Strega, and don't consider the pressing reality of death. In thinking this way, they are able to avoid the existential dread of existence, yet fall prey to time by failing to recognize how fleeting it is, in how death is inextricably tied to life. Makoto, Junpei, and Yukari decide to chill at karaoke after the ceremony, and the game ends, their apathetic attitudes implying the imminent fall caused by Nyx. This bad ending isn't unsettling in the conventional sense, with it seeming happy enough, but the overarching implications for the characters makes it a deeply bleak conclusion. Should Makoto choose to let Ryoji live, everyone will steel themselves to face Nyx in a final battle for everyone's souls. The SEAS team finally ascends to the top of Tartarus to face Nyx and prevent the fall when they are intercepted by Strega. Strega provides an effective foil to SEAS in showcasing the latent desire within humanity for the fall within their nihilistic view towards death. Strega is defeated and the team finally comes to face Nyx's Avatar. Nyx's Avatar identifies itself to SEAS, declaring that it is what people fear most and what they try to ignore. Nyx then contextualizes the whole battle by declaring,
"The moment man devoured the fruit of knowledge, he sealed his fate. Entrusting his future to the cards, man clings to a dim hope. Yes, the Arcana is the means by which all is revealed."
This statement implies that to be conscious in devouring the fruit of knowledge, man became aware of different fundamental structures and characteristics of life. However, the Arcana serves as a transcendental subject, which is to say, a framework with which all subjects can be understood. In a Leibnizian sense, all predicates are contained within one subject, which can be wholly understood by an omniscient being. In declaring the Arcana as the means by which all is revealed, Nyx establishes that the knowledge granted by the fruit of knowledge, likewise, reveals all things that could possibly be. After SEAS defeats all the different Arcana of Nyx, she finishes her phases and declares,
"Beyond the beaten path lies the absolute end. It matters not who you are. Death awaits you."
This is the root cause of the nihilism that afflicted Akutsuki and Koetsu Kijiro. With knowledge of many things, life can be reduced to a simple framework of pointless activity that is rendered into nothingness by the inevitability of death. After seemingly defeating Nyx's Avatar, the members of SEAS are pinned to the ground by the sheer weight of the coming fall, and their battle is looking bleak in the face of death, and the nihilism that surrounds it. It's during this moment of apparent failure that Makoto is taken back to the Velvet Room. For the entirety of Persona 3, Makoto's Velvet Room was a constantly ascending elevator. It was only after the final battle with Nyx, where the protagonist faced the inevitable reality of death with his friends, that the elevator reached its destination. The elevator seems to represent the underlying linear structure of time that represents life within the Velvet Room, showcasing how we as individuals are ultimately subject to the flow of time and seem to only move forward within it, towards its inevitable end. It's upon the elevator finally reaching its destination that Makoto receives the Universe Arcana, being the most significant arcana that a protagonist in the Persona series could receive at the climax of their journey. In the other Persona games discussed on this channel, the two protagonists received the World Tarot card that represented a great change at the end of a cycle of life, showcasing how the protagonists grew and affirmed their connections in their distinct ways. As such, the Universe Arcana is very distinct, implying a sort of transcendental end to all journeys that could be had in life, as death ultimately underpins it. In finding an answer to life to seal Nyx off, Makoto came to terms with and lived authentically in conjunction with the most fundamental constitutive aspect of being, insofar as it is understood as temporality. With this newfound power, the protagonist uses all of his life energy to seal away Nyx, preventing the fall of humanity. Thus, the Dark Hour is ended and life returns to normal, with the members of SEES losing their memory of the hypertemporal Dark Hour. Time moves on until graduation day arrives, and the main characters of SEES still haven't regained their memories. However, in the middle of Mitsuru's graduation speech, everybody regains their memories because of their shared plans for this special occasion, and their latent resolve to live life authentically after defeating Nyx. Everyone doesn't just remember everything due to a plot contrivance, but rather because of their determination to understand their past, in addition to their present, to plan for a fulfilling and meaningful future, unlike in the bad ending. While everybody heads to the roof, Makoto and Aigis sit together during the warm spring day, and Aigis explains how she's found new purpose, unique to her throughout her experiences.
All things eventually come to an end. Every living thing will one day disappear. Only by accepting this can one discover what they truly want, what the meaning of their life will be. I understand now why I was so tormented by my lack of strength. Protecting others became more than just an order I had to obey. I wanted to do it for my own reasons. I realized this once I decided to try and prevent the fall. When I thought I might never see you again, something else became clear to me. What I wanted most. And so, I made up my mind. I decided that I would continue to protect you. I want to be your strength. I know I'm not the only one who can do this, but that's okay. My life will be worth living if it's for this reason.
While Aigis describes her desire to protect Makoto into the future, he passes away in her arms because of the latent life force he lost in sealing away Nyx. While Makoto's story in Persona 3 was ultimately a continuous linear journey towards his inevitable sacrifice to stave off the human will to death, the answer provides a somewhat disjointed epilogue to the journey by thoroughly exploring the memories and motivations of the past to understand the value and beauty of the future. Aigis is left in a state of abject melancholy and apathy after losing her purpose in life just as she had found it in the death of Makoto. The cast comments on how they expected Aigis to be more crestfallen given the circumstances, yet she seems relatively stable. All of the members of SEES meet up in Iwatodai dorms for one last time to give up their evokers, symbolizing them putting the shadow fighting period of their lives behind them. It's then when this ritual is interrupted by Metis attacking the group, whereby Aigis awakens to the power of the Wild Card to restrain her. Aigis awakened to the power of the Wild Card because of her retaining a similar disposition to Makoto at the start of the game, in questioning her purpose after it had been taken away from her. All of the members of SEES soon realize the day March 31st keeps repeating itself, and similarly to how Tartarus and the Dark Hour existed due to the latent desires of man, the Abyss of Time exists because of the latent desires of the SEES members to avoid moving forward in their lives because of their regrets. After fighting to the bottom of the Abyss of Time, the team discovers that their regret is physically embodied in the form of a shadow version of the protagonist. After defeating the embodiment of the group's shared regret in losing someone so close to them for unknown reasons, they're given the ability to use key fragments to either return to the present or a previous point in time before the battle with Nyx. The group can't decide on what to do and splits into three parties of disagreement, one that believes they should move on, one wishing to change the past, and another considering the present friendships that they have. Aigis finds purpose in fighting for her life and is able to get all the key fragments from the various members of SEES. Aigis ultimately makes her decision to witness the miracle that Makoto created to understand his death and how Nyx was defeated. As Pharaohs had previously hinted to Makoto earlier in the game, Nyx and the subsequent end she brings is revealed not to be a malevolent entity, but is actually a metaphysical force that is called upon by the malice and resentment of the collective human psyche. As such, when Makoto sacrificed himself to seal away Nyx, he was not affecting the metaphysical entity itself, and was instead keeping the calls of Erebus from reaching her to facilitate the end. This metaphysical reality of Nyx and Erebus reveals a fundamental philosophical relationship underpinning the game's narrative that remains uniquely distinct from the rest of the Persona games. Unlike forces like Nyarlathotep, Izanami, and Yaldabaoth, Nyx is not a being born of the human psyche, but instead a fundamental fact of life that contextualizes humanity's consciousness and lived experience. As such, there is no way to truly defeat it or deny it as a force, as it is essential to the constitution of the universe. However, the victory of the game's narrative comes from Caesar's ability to overcome the nihilism and malice found within the human spirit when faced with the inevitable death of all things. By sealing away Erebus, Makoto shows Caesar that while Nyx, or to put it in more philosophical terms, death and temporality can't be defeated, the fall of humanity can be prevented by changing the way that we react to this truth. Makoto's answer ends up being the attachments he found within his friends and his place within Gekkoukan High. This answer to death isn't an end goal, and doesn't fully resolve the issue of the fall, because it's a way of life that must be continually reevaluated and changed, just as life changes. Aigis found meaning after the resolution of her fight with Nyx, but lost her sense of self after she lost that which was most precious to her. Through the journey of the answer, all of Caesar came to understand the reality of Makoto's sacrifice, and how they could work to stave off the fall in their own unique ways of building their own distinct futures. Persona 3's narrative reaches a similar conclusion to Heidegger in his seminal work Being and Time, in its assertion that living is inextricably tied to death, and in how living life authentically can make for a meaningful use of our temporal lives. The narrative ultimately critiques the common misgiving that living in the moment is what makes the most out of our time, and helps people seize the day. It points out that, in reality, such an attitude shrinks away from the gravity of our finitude, and ultimately fails to truly take advantage of every moment, because an authentically fulfilling life must come with the understanding of how limited it truly is. After the answer, the characters are all left to their own devices to find their own meaning in the wake of the ineffable reality of death. And after playing Persona 3, I can't help but turn my attention to finding meaning myself. Hey, to all of you that made it this far through the video, I really appreciate you watching it. I hope you got something interesting from it, because I really think that Persona 3 has a lot of great themes, and pretty much every aspect of its story ties excellently into it. The overarching theme of death, time, memories, and how consciousness relates to all of that. So if you like this video, please be sure to subscribe, and let me know what kind of content you'd like to see in the future. Thanks, and until next time.
私ガイドブックみたいだけど。何を？
Only a small percentage of people.
Feeling no pressure, but appease in the media.